So I think we've all seen or at least heard about Stray at this point. It's been quite the mind-blowing out of left field game. So let's have a look at it. Let's read what does Steam say about it in terms of its description. It says Stray, lost, alone and separated from family, a stray cat must untangle an ancient mystery to escape a long-forgotten cyber city and find their way home. So this game was developed by Blue 12 Studios, and really this feline adventure, it has you exploring an underground cyber city, and in the setting is long after humans have gone. It's inhabited by robots. There's a mixture of puzzles, multitude of platforming, and some really cute feline activities. You are playing as a cat now, not a super powered up cat, just a normal plain cat. Really out of left field main character. And the question always is, well, can a game about something so normal in terms of who you are really be that fun? And the big question is it actually worth it? As always, let's start with the visuals. Stray has quite a beautiful graphic setting, to be honest. It uses quite a mixture of colours, browns, oranges, yellows, and it complements those with vibrant greens, blues and pinks to really make sort of certain areas or like specific things like signs, windows, or even your path that you're meant to be taking stand out. So it's actually got a beautiful color palette, really strong visuals. It's not ultra realistic. You're not going to find, super hyper realistic graphics, but really these aren't needed for this kind of game. They're not really needed anywhere. They look cool, but if the gameplay is crap, well, lighting is used to sort of set that darker tone and that theme to the Undersea. It sort of flares with brightness in places, as I say, that can help guide you as a player as to where you're meant to go. You can also just set certain things out that it either wants you to see or that you just notice because it's eye-catching. For me though, if we're looking at visuals, and I'm going to include it here, is the animations for playing as a cat. From jumping, knocking items over, scratching doors, the general running, walking and turning. When you think of how a cat actually moves and like all the muscles and the bones and all of that about how they move and how fluid their movement is, like that must have been so difficult to develop and to get accurate. So for me, that's a real highlight of this game. I'm not going to say you feel like a cat because I'm not actually a cat, so don't know what it feels like, but the developers put a lot of work into ensuring that the feel is as fluid as possible, and I really think that they achieved that here. As I sort of already mentioned, visual appearance though is a completely personal thing, and it doesn't often determine if a game is actually good or bad. That's kind of where the gameplay is. My only gripe, and I'll say it here, was more to do with the camera. In the few instances I found the camera would be awkward to use. Forced camera perspectives gave me the old Resident Evil vibes, and other times it would be hard to move my camera around into the correct position to be able to like jump from one place to another. When you get like a little cue to tell you can jump here. It didn't happen that often, however it still happened, and it still kind of made it slightly more awkward, especially in a game which is as chilled out as Stray actually is. So moving on to gameplay, I found Stray had me sort of following, they were fairly self-contained smaller areas. It's not like a massive open world. You explore different towns and different like under sewers and areas like that, and you run back and forth through them, especially the towns. I found myself keep going back through some of the towns. It allows for ample time to enjoy that unique perspective of being a small feline in an urban jungle, where you're smaller than a human, but everything else is still that sort of size. So it's quite unique in that respect. You've got both horizontal and vertical exploration, cats, high mobility, jumping up and climbing. When you're not exploring towns, you find yourself running through fairly linear sort of areas. You must go here and then there. There's not much explanation outside of the towns I found. You'd either be sneaking or you could be running to avoid what Stray would call enemies. There was a mixture, and I've already mentioned this, of puzzles and platforming, making use of that mobility and agility of a cat, being able to navigate all the rooftops, fit through the different small windows and all the hard to reach places where cats always like to get themselves into and get stuck. No trees to climb up though, that was a bit sad. The roughly 4.5 hours of Stray will provide you with a fairly consistent experience of this style of gameplay. You're going to encounter a fair amount of puzzles and platforms, to be honest, knocking down planks to get somewhere, activating switches, some of those more generic ones, finding items to barter for a service to progress a puzzle, slightly more unique there. My favorite one was sort of rolling barrels around, that you go inside the barrel and roll it around. I thought that was pretty cool. And then of course there's just more platforming on top of that. I found a lot of these to be fairly similar to one another, but there were quite a few standout moments that sort of made me go, actually this is quite cool. In terms of that complexity and difficulty though of the puzzles and platforming, I never really felt challenged, if I'm completely honest. I found the platforming pretty calming. The puzzles were a low bar to entry. It made for a really relaxing experience, along with a really good sort of music score to fit with it. There was like this cyberpunky music around it. Really enjoyed that. I found it to be quite a welcome contrast from a lot of hard hardcore games being released recently, where games where like they're either super punishing or just generally difficult. Maybe it's trying to understand, like with RPGs, all the different stats and how they work. This was something different. It just allowed you to chill out and allowed you to progress at a steady pace through the journey, and it used a lot of atmosphere building up with all that lighting and that sound to sort of really add to your experience, but it never felt difficult. I think it's relevant to discuss those interactions that you get to make as a cat here, because I kind of consider if you're playing as a cat, that gameplay is, you know, scratching up the furniture, right? Which you can do. You can scratch up all that furniture and rip things down and just knock over glasses. All those things cats are famous for. Play with all the items, scratching doors. You can even sort of go up and rub yourself against the little robots to sort of try and make them give you attention. I thought it was really cool they added all this in. You know, that level of detail they didn't need to have, but they added it in because it makes it all the better. And I think if you are a cat lover, you're going to absolutely love that. In terms of the story, without wanting to give spoilers and things like that, you are of course a silent protagonist, you are a cat. So Stray introduces us to someone called B12. It's a flying robot and it's a companion for your little feline friend. You build a bond and a relationship through the story. B12 allows you to do all the things cats can't, use the computer or talk to the robots and translate it to you. So it's used to help the player understand and speak to the citizens, understand their thoughts, their stories, their loves, their hates, their fears, all from that living in isolation. It really explores that theme of living in isolation for so long, not being out in the surface. Really, B12 becomes just as important to us and the story as playing the cat. You know, you're invested not just in the story of the cat, but of B12 as well. And it's our gateway to understanding what is going on and building a story together. For me, I think B12 is a huge positive and absolutely amazing for the story of Stray. It fleshes out a world and story whom without would feel a bit flat and a bit lost, especially with a silent protagonist, you know, not being able to talk to anyone or understand them if they want to keep that sort of interaction that you are just a cat. You can't speak human or robot. However, B12, for whatever reason, knows how to speak cat. And he allows us to connect to those characters which we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Understand them, learn more about them, and all their different struggles. I've already mentioned this, but I think it's worth bringing up again. The main story only took me about 4.5 hours to go through the entire game. That was at a fairly leisurely pace as well. There is replayability, but it's mainly for your achievement hunters. One achievement is this sort of speedrunning type achievement, for example. So if you're an achievement hunter, if you're a speedrunner, you might enjoy this as well. It'll give you a bit more than 4.5 hours. I personally like to play a game, enjoy its story, that I don't really go back and do things. For me, I found it a pretty short-lived experience. Short-lived, but well thought out with what is there. So I would rather have a shorter game that's really polished than a long game that's absolutely terrible. So I'm not saying it's a complete criticism here. What you won't find is a long, complex story with highly evolved characters saving the world from the latest apocalypse. Instead, it's more of a cute personal struggle of a cat trying to find their way through a lost undercity. Overall, I think Stray is a game that comes out of left field. I don't think I heard many people asking for a game where you get to play as a cat. However, Blue 12 have created quite an adventure that feels good to play. It's polished. As I say, I'd rather have a short, polished game than a long, unpolished turd. The interactions with the environment are cute. The animations and capture of how a feline or a cat would move are really well designed and animated. Like, I really enjoyed this part of it. I really did. The environments look beautiful with limited color tones. The journey, yes, is short-lived. It's a short game, but then there's quite a few absolutely amazing games that are just that short. The platforming and puzzles are not too challenging. With all this, I think if you're a cat lover, you're going to love this game. If you're someone who just wants to chill out, if maybe you want a palate cleanser from all your hardcore games, or maybe you've had, you know, one of those days and you want to get home, you just want to chill out, Stray is a perfect game to do that with. So I'd really highly recommend it for that. However, if you're looking for a challenge, if you're looking for a deep, long narrative, if you're looking for like advanced combat or really advanced platforming, I don't think you'll find it here. But really, Stray sits as a reminder that you don't have to make a game super challenging to be good. You don't have to make huge open worlds for a game to be good. You don't have to have complex UIs and hugely complex systems for your game to be good. I find it quite a breath of fresh air, if I'm completely honest, to have a game I could just sit and chill out to. But I want to hear what your thoughts are. Have you played Stray? And if so, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. If you have yet to play Stray yet, or maybe you haven't played it at all, I still want to hear from you. Will you try it out? Will you give it a go? Or is this actually a hard pass for you? I can see quite a few people sort of looking at it and saying, you know what, it's not for me. If you like this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing if you'd like to see more from me. I'd really appreciate all that support. But until next time, I'll see you soon.